Welcome, classic rock fans. Well, Gene Simmons is in the news once more, claiming that America is racist and anti-Semitic. Now, Gene Simmons is famed for his tact and diplomacy, but has taken, like he always does, a rather bludgeoning approach to all things. Seeing as most of my subscribers are at least 50% from the USA, I'd kind of be interested to elicit your opinion on this matter. Is Gene Simmons right here, or do you think it's a load of old hogwash? So Gene Simmons has been talking to the press on this issue, using a few anecdotal references to hammer home his point. Let's not forget Paul Stanley accused Ace Frehley of anti-Semitism during their tours, I think it was in the 70s. Gene Simmons has said on the racism epidemic that it's something that greatly affects America and needs to be stamped out. We need to shine a light on these cockroaches, he says. He has told Metal Hammer magazine, if I may quote, "Yes, America is racist, it's anti-Semitic, and yet here in America there are no limits. You can have an African-American president. You can also have the alternative, a semi-racist, semi-extremist president. But anything is possible, which is why I still worship the idea of America. It can get better, and it will get better." Who he was referring to as the semi-racist president, well, I'll leave that up to you to decide who he was alluding to. To me, there's no doubt that the wonderful music that we celebrate on this channel owes a huge debt to that, what Lester Bangs describes as the African-American idiom. Maybe not progressive rock, of course, something that I'm rather obsessed with, especially European prog that draws its influences from a more Western classical symphonic tradition. And jazz is a hugely influential form of music in terms of American culture and rock and roll. If I may quote the Musical Crossroads website, "Jazz is another iconic example of African-American musical hybridity that occupies a central position in the Musical Crossroads gallery. In the late 19th century, African-American musicians combined popular songs and marches with African-American folk forms like ragtime, sacred music, and the blues to create a new form of heavily syncopated and improvisory music. Jazz, as the music came to be called today, occupies such a central place in America's cultural heritage that many fans and scholars call it America's classical music." Oh, I don't think America is any more prejudiced than other Western nations here in the UK or Europe, perhaps. In fact, I found more outwardly and boldly expressed, articulated racist views when I worked in Eastern Europe. And there's no doubt the music that we love and celebrate on this channel, as I said, owes a huge debt to this culture. And if I'm not mistaken, I think jazz and these forms of music emerge from the spirituals, ragtime, folk music, much of it indebted to or associated with African Americans, especially in the 19th century and early 20th century. For example, Wikipedia states that following the Civil War, black Americans, through the employment as musicians playing European music in military bands, developed a new style of music called ragtime, which gradually evolved into jazz. In developing this latter musical form, African Americans contribute knowledge of the sophisticated polyrhythmic structure of the dance and folk music of peoples across the African continent. These musical forms had a wide-ranging influence on the development of music within the United States and around the world in the 20th century. However, I'm not sure any of us on this channel would actually disagree with that. I suppose the point is, how do we feel about Gene Simmons' statements? First of all, how do we feel about Gene Simmons? And first of all, the statement that America is racist and anti-Semitic. Is he taking a sledgehammer here to crack a nut? And he uses lots of anecdotal stories to hammer home his point. And Gene Simmons, as we know, tragically, his mother survived the concentration camps. But he goes on to tell a story of, as a boy, he was refused entry into a swimming pool on the grounds that he was Jewish. However, I think the sort of segregation and prejudice was pretty much apparent in a lot of Western countries. I remember here in the UK being signs on windows for rooms to let or jobs offered, no Irish, no blacks. That was a fairly common occurrence. However, thankfully, I don't think we've moved on from that sort of thing. But he also tells a very interesting story about the time he was dating Diana Ross. He said he got a lot of crap due to the fact that he was in this relationship. In fact, he says of Diana Ross, if I may quote Classic Rock magazine, she came from the projects of Detroit. There was a tour with the Supremes headlining, Dave Clark 5 opening, and they went through the South in a bus. They got to Alabama someplace and people were cheering and everybody's going crazy. The Supremes get on stage and everybody starts dancing in the streets. See what he did there? They would sing, Where Did Our Love Go and all that stuff. But at the end of the show, shamefully, the Supremes had to go to what was called a coloured hotel, and on the way out on the bus, there were bullet holes in the side. There is no doubt that all nations have a fairly shameful past with this issue. So the question I'd like to throw open to my subscribers is, first of all, what do we think of Gene Simmons? 2, is Gene Simmons correct? Do you think that there is inherent and overtly racist tendencies in American society, any more than any other Western nation? Or is Gene Simmons just sounding off, opening his trap as he always does to draw attention to himself? Nevertheless, the issue he raises is a serious issue, and it's one that warrants our consideration. So I'm asking for your comments and thoughts on this matter. Please do leave any thoughts regarding Gene Simmons, this issue, and is America inherently racist? That's the issue that seems to be raised here. Do leave your comments below. As always, I'd like to thank you for watching if you haven't switched off by this point. If you haven't switched off, I'd like to thank you for doing just that, and to ask you to go that step further and consider liking and subscribing and doing all that stuff. And while you're down there, maybe you could check some of the links below this video for ways you can support the sterling work down here at Classic Album Review. Become a Patreon, why not? There's a fine body of work on my Patreon now. God knows how many videos there are. Plus we engage in at least a monthly Zoom call now and again. It's all fun. And your support would be appreciated, as it helps me to make more videos. Anyway, I shall end this video as I always do by hoping you are well and safe and staying healthy. But more important than any of that is that you keep listening.